Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Making 2D Minecraft. It may seem crazy to believe, but this project is already half a year old, and we are still going strong. But I don't want to work on this project forever, so in these last few episodes we are going to be wrapping things up. But we still have a lot to do. So in this episode I'm going to be implementing some important features that I haven't gotten to yet, as well as polishing up some old features as well. So without any further ado, let's get started. So in the last episode, I started working on creating some menus, and I specifically focused on the title screen. And a lot of you guys didn't really like this logo that I designed, and honestly, I think you guys are right. But lucky enough, an awesome viewer by the name of Mr. Fireshard actually sent me a design for a replacement logo, and it looks fantastic. So I have now replaced the old logo, and with just one texture changed, the whole title screen looks way better. So shoutouts to you, Mr. Fireshard. And while we are on the topic of awesome viewers, I gave you guys a task in the last episode to come up with some cool phrases to put into the Splash text system, and you guys definitely delivered. So I went through as many of your guys' comments as I could, and I selected some of the best phrases and put them into the list. And since you guys did such a good job, I will do the same thing for the next video as well. So if you have any phrase you would like to see on the title screen, put it down in the comments below. So with all of that out of the way, I think it's time we actually start implementing some features. And I want to start with a feature I tried to implement a couple months ago, but failed horribly. And that feature is water. When I first attempted this, I didn't expect it to be so difficult, but it quickly turned into a nightmare. So in order to fix this, I decided to just start over, because the code I had written before was so confusing to begin with. Now Minecraft water has a few basic rules, and they revolve around two different kinds of water: source water and flowing water. As you probably know already, flowing water comes from a source block, and the source block creates new flowing water by checking the block beneath it to see if it is solid. If it isn't solid, then that block becomes a flowing water block. However, if the block beneath it is solid, then it does the same thing as before, except horizontally instead. And these rules also apply to flowing water, except that once flowing water travels far enough horizontally, it stops, because the height of the water decreases the farther it travels in that direction. Now in order to store this information in our game, I added two tags that are stored inside of each block. One is whether or not the water is a source block, and the other is the current water level. In order to show the water level visually, I tried to shift the start of the texture downwards, but it started off very buggy. But after rewriting some of the block rendering code, I am now able to crop the size of the tile to match the current water level. Now I'm sure you've realized it, but this water system can easily be applied to lava as well. So I created a lava block and applied nearly the same rules to it. And I also created a new light source to go along with it, so that the lava can emit an orange glow. Now having water and lava is great, but they only really matter if they can be found naturally in the world. So I think it's time to update the world generation. There are two different things I want to generate with water and lava: pools and falls. Let's start with pools. In order to generate a pool of either water or lava, we need some way of calculating the area of an empty space that we want to fill. And in order to do that, we need a pathfinding algorithm. Now you might be thinking, a pathfinding algorithm? How is that going to help us? Well, if we need to find all of the empty blocks in an area, we can use a pathfinding algorithm to search for those empty blocks. And luckily for me, I made an entire video about a year ago showcasing some different pathfinding algorithms. So I got to work implementing one that can be used in our game. Now I won't bore you with the details, but this pathfinding system I came up with is very versatile, so we will be able to use it for some other things later on. For now though, I created a method that can calculate the volume of an area, and here you could see it in action as I move my mouse around. If you're wondering why it's capping off at about 300 blocks, I decided to put a limit on how many blocks it can search, so that if I search in an area with tens of thousands of blocks, it won't end up freezing the game by accident. But now that we have this ability to find the volume of an area, this means that when I generate chunks, I can now randomly select positions on the screen and if the position selected has an area between a certain range, then I could fill that area up with either water or lava. So here's what it looks like. You could see that even if the surface level of the fluid is interrupted by blocks in the middle, the fluid actually generates around it, which is fantastic. I also applied this behavior farther underground with lava instead. The only significant difference between the two is that lava pools can be much larger than water pools can. Now, I mentioned a bit ago that I want to generate two different things with liquids. We have liquid pools completed, so now let's talk about falls instead. Generating waterfalls, for example, is really simple. Basically, for every chunk, I generate a bunch of random positions, just like before, except this time, if that position contains a solid block, such as stone, but is open on either the left, right, or bottom sides, then a water source block is placed. And I did the same thing with lava as well, just lower down in the world, of course. And while I was at it, I also decided to add buckets to the game, so that the player can easily transport both water and lava. But as of right now, nothing special happens when they mix, so that is something I'm going to have to implement in the future. So now that we are done with fluids for now, let's move on to the next thing I want to work on in this episode. Since we now have a pathfinding algorithm implemented, I have something else that I want to use it for. Right now, when you chop down a tree, the leaves just kind of awkwardly sit up in the air, and they don't ever decay. So let's fix that. In order to resolve this issue, I can actually use the pathfinding algorithm to find if a leaf is attached to a tree or not. And I do this by following the leaves around it and stopping once it reaches a log block. So here is what it looks like with the leaf decay rate turned up really high. And it works well. But we now have a new issue. The leaves don't drop any saplings yet. To fix this, I quickly transferred some sapling textures over to the block texture atlas and added a new loot table for each leaf type, so that each has a chance to drop a sapling. So now when you cut down a tree, the leaves decay, dropping saplings, and you can then start the process all over again. Now the next thing I want to work on is completely unnecessary, but will look really nice, which is adding more particles. Now in the last episode, I added stars, which can be seen during the night. And I actually created a particle system to handle them. So we already have something to handle particles. The main thing I want to use particles for right now is for breaking blocks. In order to get this to work though, I had to create this fancy function to randomly select a pixel from within a block texture and return its color. Then when the player is mining a block, I can have it generate particles around that spot. Getting the physics of this to work though at the beginning was a bit messy, but I eventually got it working. The particles generated from mining the block are different from when it is actually broken. And I did this because I couldn't find a way to get the particles' collision to work while they were still inside of the block. Either way, I think they turned out really nice, and I will be adding more particles later on. Now, if you've been watching this series for a bit, you will know that it is a tradition that in every episode I add a brand new biome. And after some careful consideration, I've decided to add the swamp biome, since we now have water. To get started on this, I transferred over some new textures that we will be using, and I then got to work on writing out some code to actually generate this biome. Like before, I created a simple spawning system to generate pools of water, except this time they will be generated on the surface and significantly smaller. Anyways, let's look at the result. Now this isn't the most fancy looking swamp, but it gets the job done. I still need to add things like vines and lily pads, and obviously slimes, but I will do that later on. Anyways, I really hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. Sorry it took a while to make. I've just been trying to juggle multiple things at a time right now, so sometimes it could take a bit to get things done. Regardless, thank you guys as always for watching and for your wonderful support, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye!